Into the Wild is a winding story about a young man whom, after graduating college, becomes a traveling vagabond until, after 2 years, he is found dead in the Alaska bush. Written by Jon Krakauer and first published in 1996, it was originally an article in Outside magazine in 1993. It was then updated in 2007 alongside a critically acclaimed movie. Finally, this version includes an excerpt from 2015 with more discoveries about how Christopher John McCandless died in Alaska. Welcome to Sidwell Adventures. For the rest of the review, skip to the timestamp down below. Otherwise, if you are interested in knowing about the channel, it's just all about exploring the world and new perspectives, this time through literature. If that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe down below and like the video. It really helps it do well in the algorithm. Welcome to the studio. It kind of changes every year, but this is the current version of it. I'll be doing more videos like these in the future just so I can broaden the topics I can share with you all and my thoughts on them. They're kind of easier to do while I'm at school or if I'm working through the summer when I can't really go out and do really long adventures and make videos about them. But at the end of the day, it's more content for you all. I get to get my opinions and worldview out there and share more topics and more things about the world. Who knows, I may even do more book reviews in the future. Now, I realize the irony in doing this book in that I almost never read books to do a book report in high school or even in college. This book has probably already been done to death by every adventurer, every YouTuber out there. So I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm just gonna give you my opinion on that and hope that you enjoy it. So why read this book? It definitely has a kind of appeal. A lot of people, I feel like, fantasize about, discarding society, living freely without responsibility, without, having a credit card or having to go to work every day. This guy did it. Chris McCandless, he left everything behind. He donated his savings to a charity that would work to end starvation in America. This guy did it. And if you want to, know how it went, you want to know what it takes, you can read this book and you can get a pretty good idea of what that life is like. Overall, the structure of the book is kind of meandering. There's about 200 pages in it, and probably half of that, or a little more than that, is the actual story of him, going different places, hitchhiking different places. There's just not a lot known about what he did with his time other than survive, basically. We know where he went, but what he did specifically, how he was feeling, didn't always get recorded because his journals aren't very complete and they're very scattered. There's a lot of chapters dedicated to informing a reader about other explorers and adventurers who died or had some great tragedy in Alaska or elsewhere. The author shares his own mishap in Alaska, or near-death experience, before wrapping up the book in about 5 to 6 chapters that are really quick and kind of sell you on the perspective of Christopher John McCandless. The last 5 to 6 chapters are a lot of where the quotes come in, a lot of where his journals record what he learned, what he now thinks of the world. The exposition, all of the extra stuff that isn't the extra story, is kind of tangential, but it's still relevant. It's still crucial to making the reader believe what the author is going to tell you in the last 5 to 6 chapters about how they think the world works. So you actually believe them when they do say that. And kind of the moral of the story right at the end of the book. It was kind of annoying, but he goes from being a kind of passive reteller of Chris's story to throwing his own perspective on all of the events and everything that happened. But by the end of the book, the reader is left questioning their perspective on living in the wild. It's very difficult. It's not nearly as appealing as people think it is, I think. Also really helps the reader come to terms with the human-centric world and living in society. And instead of fantasizing to escape it, maybe it'll help reader realize that the wild is important, but it's not as beautiful as you might think. You have to be able to survive in order to have beauty and find beauty in life. That's something we'll get into more later. But by the end, instead of escaping society, maybe you feel like you should preserve the wild and places that remain kind of habitats for endangered species and actually work for conservation. So this section is going to be the spoilers section of the video. So If you haven't read the book, go read it. It's 200 pages. It'll take you maybe a couple days, maybe a week. So for me personally, I was first given this book my senior year in 12th grade English class. I read about 2 chapters of it and never finished it until I started rereading it about a couple weeks ago. The main character, Christopher John McCandless, I'll probably just abbreviate that as Chris going forward, has some worrying similar traits to me. Not that we're like entirely the same, but an affinity for the outdoors, not necessarily appreciating society all the time, which like I get a lot of people get. Cross-country runner, really into challenging oneself physically, especially being in the outdoors and doing physically demanding things outside. Kind of the more niche things is denying proper instruction in a new talent. So not looking up a recipe for cooking or not bothering to watch tutorial videos on different things. And I think, I mean, for me at least, it kind of takes the fun out of it. You know, I like it being a challenge. If I really want to dedicate myself to practicing something every day, then that kind of takes the fun out of it, unless it's basketball for me at least. But strong-headedness, disillusionment with the society, love of the outdoors, these things kind of drive Jon McCandless to go on his adventure. And that's something that I think a lot of us people with an affinity for the outdoors would love to do, or at least fantasize about doing. But let's get into some more of the things I enjoyed about the book. So there are a lot of literary references in the book. In fact, every chapter basically begins with an excerpt from a couple different sources. There's a lot of Henry David Thoreau in it. There's a lot of Tolstoy in it because Chris read those books and loved those books, or those authors specifically. So they all serve to kind of inform the reader about how people think about the wild and how the author thinks about the wild and how Chris thought about the wild and society, of course, and happiness. There's a lot about happiness in this book. Like, for instance, on page 197, it's a quote from Dr. Zhivago regarding happiness. He says that 2 things are basically required for it: service to others and free personality. And Chris kind of ends up agreeing with that perspective. He ends up saying, because happiness is only real when it's shared. When you're out on your own in the wild, no one knows, and then there's no one to confirm or deny your feelings, so it just kind of drives you crazy. Humans are fundamentally social animals. That's why society exists in the first place. Another one of the kind of sections of the book that I really enjoyed, one of the more beautiful quotes, is on page 184. The nomadic Bedouin does not wax poetic on the mountains, the desert in which they live and survive. They do not dote on scenery. And it's explained as it's to life and death, right? So Chris's journals, his notes as he's surviving in Alaska, are like 99% about food. And then it's a little bit about, oh, I don't feel good, I'm gonna die. And then if you're in a survival situation, you don't really have time to appreciate the environment and the beauty around you, which I thought was an important lesson to learn. It's only recently in human society that we've stopped just maliciously killing predators, because now we can survive on our own. We don't have to worry about mountain lions attacking us. We can know how to avoid them. We can know how to take care of them, actually. So it's only recently that conservation has become both necessary and possible. And then it also goes on to, talk a little bit more about happiness and what makes people happy. On page 168, Chris writes, "Circumstance has no value. It's how one relates to a situation that has value. All true meaning resides in the personal relationship to a phenomenon, what it means to you." So in that sense, society can make you happy. It's just how you relate to it. Work can make you happy. It's just how you think about work, how you appreciate work. So just allows for a lot of flexibility in your worldview and a lot of flexibility with being happy. You can learn to be happy. And I think that's kind of an important takeaway as well. So kind of circling back to why did I not finish this book in the 12th grade? And I think it's because of this reason. A lot of people, and the book even talks about this, a lot of people who first learn about the story just immediately dismiss it by saying, oh, he was an asshole, he was an idiot, he didn't treat his family right, he died. And I have to say I fell victim to that in the 12th grade when I was first given this book. But if you give it a chance and you get past some of the more confusing parts, learning the timeline, skipping around is kind of difficult. But if you give it a chance, you will definitely learn more about Chris and what made him go off into the wild for 2 years and basically ghost his parents, which not one of his more admirable traits. While he did have a somewhat complicated family life, it probably wasn't nearly as bad as we would think to ghost them entirely for 2 years. Was he an idiot? No. He read a ton. He was super well educated. He had like perfect grades in high school and college. We would not consider him idiotic in the extreme. He puts himself in deliberately challenging situations because that's where he finds meaning in life, which is, again, super dangerous and got him killed, right? With GPS satellites, there's nothing in this world that's like truly wild anymore. It's all imaged. You can get a map of it. So what Chris does is he throws away the map. He says, goodbye. I don't need any of the information on it. And in that sense, wherever he goes can be wild because it's wild to him. And that basically caused his death. And the second thing is, what actually killed him was a previously undiscovered scientific phenomenon about a toxicity in a plant that he had started eating. Now, he had a field guide. He had a big book about things he could and could not eat in Alaska. The book did not say anything about this plant being toxic. So when he ate this plant, he basically was unable to process any of the other food that went into his body. It took until 2015 to discover this fact. So was he stupid? No, he was very intelligent, but he puts himself in dangerous situations. Was he an asshole? Yeah, probably. Again, he ghosted his little sister and his parents for like 2 years of his life and then died and never talked to them. But there is, the author kind of explains, there is reasons to think that he had forgiven his parents by the time he had wanted to leave the wilderness. He got stuck in the wilderness and then couldn't go back and then ate the poisonous plant that eventually killed him. And in that sense, he could have been an idiot, he could have been an asshole, but it's way deeper than that. You learn that he's very intelligent. He knew how to survive. In fact, he was very successful at it for several months before trying to leave and then getting stuck and then eating a part of a plant that nobody else in the world knew was toxic. So he couldn't have possibly have known that. Don't let that prevent you from reading the book. There's way more to learn, and there's more perspectives to realize by reading this book than just, oh, Chris was an idiot and he got himself killed. There's more to it than that, of course. That's why there's a whole book about it. That's why there's 200 pages. And that's why in 2015, they added a chapter about finding out that the plant was toxic, finding out that Chris fell victim to a toxicity that nobody else in the world knew existed. In that sense, Chris's death was a scientific discovery, or led to more science and led to perhaps people not dying in the future, which is kind of cool. So, does reading this book take the dream of living in the wild away? Does it take the fantasy away? I would say that, for me at least, being stuck in school, being stuck in kind of my life situation, not being able to move on from it, I've had that kind of fantasy and it didn't take that dream away from me. It kind of tempered its extremes. I still want to go on these great big adventures and explore the world outside of the usual perspective that most humans experience. It acted kind of reassuring that there is beauty to be found, and that confirms that there is something to appreciate in living off the land. But if you put yourself in a truly survival situation without any society, you also just can't appreciate it as much as you would if you actually bothered to have adequate camping gear. So does it take the dream away? No. And you don't have to ghost your parents, so don't do that. Ultimately, very good book. Read the book. If you feel like society sucks and you feel like your solution is just to go live in the wild, maybe read this book first. It's pretty cool. It wasn't as much about living in the wild as I thought it was. It's more about why someone would do that, rather than the how. It's not really about, okay, how do you preserve meat? How do you find plants? You can do that research. This book is not that. This is the why. This is why would someone do that? And I think that is very interesting and a perspective that you should learn as well. If you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching. I was kind of confusing and meandering, just like this book. And be sure to subscribe down below, like the video, leave any comments with any of your perspectives or what you think about the book, if you have read it. And if you haven't read it, what do you think? Are you going to read it? Do you think he was just an asshole? Do you think he was just an idiot? I don't know. Anyways, thanks so much. Have a good day.